There is no electricity, there is no clean water, and the update that I had last night was that they're down to their last can of corn.
Mr. Speaker, the whole House will be gravely concerned about the desperate situation in Gaza. It cannot continue, and we are deploying all our diplomatic resources, including in the United Nations, to help find a viable solution. I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her urgent question and also for the private messages from Gaza that she has made available to me. And I'm looking forward to meeting her in the Foreign Office tomorrow. The scale of civilian deaths and displacement in Gaza is shocking. I was particularly disturbed to hear about the situation of civilians trapped in the Holy Family Church complex in Gaza City, the lack of water and food, and reports of sniper fire causing civilian deaths inside the complex. Although Israel has the right to defend itself against terror, restore its security and bring the hostages home, it must abide by international law and take all possible measures to protect civilians. Mr. Speaker, no one wants to see this conflict go on for a moment longer than necessary. We recognise the sheer scale of the suffering and are appalled at the impacts on civilians. What we urgently need are more humanitarian pauses to get all the hostages out and life-saving aid in. We welcome the recent opening of Kerem Shalom crossing to help achieve this, but it is not enough. Our immediate priorities are to secure the release of British hostages, to show solidarity with Israel in defending itself against Hamas, whilst complying with international humanitarian law, and to call for such pauses, both at the UN and directly with Israel, to ensure emergency aid can be distributed in Gaza, including fuel, water and medicine. The Foreign Secretary will discuss the situation in Gaza with regional leaders this week in his visit to Egypt and Jordan. The government has recently announced an additional £30 million of British aid, tripling the UK aid budget for the occupied Palestinian territories this financial year. To date, Mr. Speaker, we have delivered 74 tonnes of aid, but there is still more to do. Casualty numbers are far too high, and we are calling on Hamas to release each and every kidnapped hostage. We are also actively exploring other routes for aid into Gaza, including maritime options. Of course, Mr. Speaker, as both the Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary have said, ultimately this must end. We of course want to see an end to the fighting, but this must be a sustainable ceasefire, meaning Hamas must stop launching rockets into Israel and release the hostages. Over 130 hostages are still unaccounted for. They must be released immediately and returned to their families. To achieve long-term peace in the Middle East, a viable two-state solution is needed. Leaving Hamas in power in Gaza would be a permanent roadblock on the path to this. No one can be expected to live alongside a terrorist organisation, committed to its destruction and dedicated to repeating those attacks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm extremely grateful to you for granting this urgent question. I thank the Minister for his response. I'll begin by pointing to my register of interests as an unpaid advisor to ICJP. I've spoken before in this House about my extended family who are in the Holy Family Parish Church in Zaytun in Gaza. And the situation has been desperate for weeks, but now it's descending. There are tanks outside the gates, there are soldiers and snipers pointing into the complex, shooting at anyone who ventures out. And the convent was bombed. On Saturday, 2 women were shot. They were simply trying to get to the toilet. There is no electricity, there is no clean water, and the update that I had last night was that they're down to their last can of corn. I'm told, after pressure, that food has been delivered, but they've not seen it. And when this began a week ago, the IDF soldiers ordered these civilians to evacuate against their will. Can the government confirm that it sees the forcible displacement of civilians as unacceptable? Yeah. The people in this church, Mr. Speaker, are civilians. They have nothing to do with Hamas. They are nuns, orphans, disabled people. They are a small Christian community, and they know everyone. As the Pope has said, and my family can confirm, it is categorically untrue to say Hamas are operating from there. This situation has been condemned by many. Will this government do so? But it is important to stress this suffering is not confined to just this church. And just last week, we saw the utterly tragic deaths of 3 Israeli hostages. There are others reportedly murdered by Hamas and hundreds still in captivity. This is also unacceptable. And 73 days on in this conflict, the death toll is only rising. It is time for the international community to say this violence is now making peace harder, not easier. The government talks now of a sustainable ceasefire, and while I and the Liberal Democrats welcome the change in tone, it is unclear whether this is in fact a change in position. Will the government demand an immediate bilateral ceasefire? Will it change how it votes at the UN Security Council as a result? And when will the Prime Minister accept that the only route to peace is political, not military? That there is one way to get rid of Hamas and to end the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and it's not this. And very finally, when will the United Kingdom fulfil its historic obligations to the region, recognise Palestine as a first step to delivering the two states, which is the only way to guarantee security and dignity for both Israelis and Palestinians?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Lady for her comments. I understand how deeply distressing this is for her, with her family caught up in the Holy Family Church complex. As I said in my response, I'm grateful to her for the harrowing update she was able to give me direct from the Holy Family Church. I'm very pleased to hear that she thinks food has been delivered, and we will follow up that point directly after this urgent question. She talks about the protection of civilians, and the British government makes absolutely clear that international humanitarian law must be abided by. She asked about, when she mentioned humanitarian aid, I can tell the House that yesterday we understand that 191 trucks entered Gaza Strip, 127 through Rafah and 64 through Kerem Shalom, which is a new avenue which we very much welcome. Finally, the point she made about the United Nations resolution. We are working with partners on a resolution, and I expect that there will be a vote at 3 p.m. UK time today. That is what we are working towards, and while the position is not yet clear, we are hoping to support that resolution.